Two Climate Witness Project partners, Nate Rauh-Bieri and Richard Kilmer, attended COP26 as part of the Christian Climate Observers Program. Let's join in on this conversation to hear them discuss what they saw in answer to 5 big questions.
So all the countries in the world once a year get together and talk about policy around climate change. So probably the most important of the COP meetings was COP21 in Paris in 2015. And that's when the countries of the world agreed to take actions to hold global warming to under 2 degrees centigrade versus pre-industrial levels. And then since that time, discussions have gone on and scientists have said 2 degrees is still going to be too much. We really should be aspirationally looking at 1.5 degrees. And so one of the things that they did at the COP21 meeting, that was the 2015 Paris Agreement, was to set goals, but then say we're going to come back and readjust those in 5 years. So the COP26 was also an extremely important meeting when some of those goals were sort of readdressed. So that's what the members of the countries of the world meet every year. COP26, the one that we just concluded, is the 26th of those meetings.
Though it wasn't as successful as any of us would have wanted, and there's some problems certainly that did happen, there were successes, and some of those successes really hadn't been addressed before. And so it was, grabbed me as really pretty significant. Like for instance, one of the agreements that happened was a commitment by more than 100 countries, I think it's up to 130 now, something like that, to prohibit deforestation. In other words, chopping down trees. That was huge, because when we talk about net zero, which means that not only will emissions drop, but it means that there'll be other ways of removing the carbon that already exists. And the major way of removing that carbon are trees. Methane is another issue. And I just testified, by the way, to the EPA about 5 minutes ago. So it was, and they're working now on a rule that would deal with methane that comes out of oil and gas fields, and that will be huge. But 105 countries signed the global methane pledge, including half of the world's top 30 methane emitting countries. And President Biden played a major role in that. This is an important issue to him. And so he said that the US was committed to reducing methane emissions by 30% by 2030, 8 years from now. Another thing that happened is all of the COPs, at least all the ones that I've been to, have had to deal with the question of finance. President Biden, in his speech before all the countries gathered, said that by 2024, the United States will quadruple the amount of money that they have to give. All nations are being asked to at least double the amount that they give, so that they can reach that 100 billion mark. President Biden said quadruple. And coal was addressed in a way that it really hadn't been before. 40 countries pledged to phase out coal. Now, that's 40 out of 197, but still 40. That hadn't happened before. And some of those are major industrial countries like Poland and like the Ukraine. That was a major accomplishment, I think. And coal had not been addressed in a substantial way until that time. So that's why that's why I really believe that there were successes. And these are things that are going to help us going forward. There's still challenges, and Nate will tell us more about those.
the successes were not so highlighted as you might expect, or you might have read. When I arrived, the very first day I arrived, I went to George Square, where there was a rally in progress, and one of the first analyses I heard of the whole thing was said by a young woman up on the stage, and she said, "It should be obvious by now that COP26 is a failure." You could maybe guess who that was. That was Greta Thunberg. And this was the halfway point. We still had another week to go. The big splashy final agreement hadn't even been written, and she was already saying, this is a failure. Now, some might say, okay, well, that was a political move to up the ante, to up the ambition. But many, her and many others said, we see the writing on the wall, and this is not close to what we need. So I'm going to try to break down some of the bad news, maybe, or the less positive news. Part of this is that the COPs are great for big pledges by countries, and yet pledges aren't the same thing as reducing emissions, which in terms of the atmosphere is all that really matters. Like the words don't matter. What matters is reducing emissions. And so far, there have now been 26 of these, and emissions haven't dipped in a meaningful sense. So this is why some people say the COPs are just bogus. They're not doing anything, which I think is wrong. But you see why people say this. Before going to COP26, the world was on track for 2.7 degrees Celsius of warming. Afterwards, because of new pledges that countries made, and again, pledges, not actual actions, the analysis was we're still on track for 2.4 degrees Celsius of warming, which is a long way from 1.5, which we badly need scientifically. And we know that 2.4, we dropped 0.3, largely because of US pledges. But we know that in the US, there are some serious domestic political headwinds. Are we making progress? The end of the conference, there was a Glasgow Climate Pact. That was the final agreement, and there were some really good things in there. It was a compromise document. It's a consensus document. And afterwards, the UK host kind of said the 1.5 degree goal is alive, but barely. It's on life support. Barely kept the opportunity alive for countries to increase their ambition going forward. And many people saw, okay, there is all kinds of industry influence on this document. Actually, the largest delegation, if you just collect individuals together of any larger than any country, was the fossil fuel industry. Another reason that a lot of activists said this didn't accomplish anything. I disagree with that, but I really understand where that's coming from. Did COP26 fail, or was it successful? I think, if there is a question behind that question, and the question is, are we going to be okay? Can we just kind of step back and let other people handle it? I wish that answer was yes, because none of us should have to be doing this. Governments and industries have known about this for longer than I've been alive. None of us should have to do that. But unfortunately, the answer is, can we relax and let other people handle it? Is no, absolutely not. And at the end of the day, though, kind of my takeaway is, it's still before COP and after COP 26, we're still in the decisive decade to act. And the story hasn't concluded. It's not over. It's not written in the stars, and it's still largely up to us. So in contrast to, say, Greta Thunberg, some of the African delegates that were there in one of the sessions said, we can't afford for this conference and what it produces going forward from here to be blah, blah, blah. We this is our mechanism to enact change on the world stage. The main thing is to go forward in hope, which I take kind of as the same thing as courage, and obviously our Christian faith can inform that. But to some extent, whether COP26 succeeded or failed, there are some really important things to know about it. But I don't think it changes. I don't think it changes significantly the things that we're called to do as Christians and as people of faith who are living during a moment of climate upheaval and the politics around it. But one of my takeaways is what's true before is still true after, and that's we are still very deeply in trouble, and we very much need to act, and that involves all of us. We kind of look to one another to determine, as social creatures, we kind of look around to one another and say, are we in danger or not? And I think that, now is the time to continue to say, yes, we are, but we also have the solutions we need, to mitigate climate change, to adapt to it, and to save our lives and improve our lives. And in the process, live out our faith and care for the most vulnerable.
To see the church at work internationally, COPs are a really good place to go, because there are just a lot of Christians and certainly people of other faiths as well. Faith is really an important, I'd say, underpinning of most of the work and the words on climate. I mean, the belief that justice drives what we do here, because the people who get hurt the most and foremost are people from the global south.
This was brought home to me through our mutual friend, Marinelle. And Marinelle's she's a young activist from the Philippines, and she became a climate activist because her island was basically devastated by super typhoon Haiyan in 2013, and that kind of launched her into doing climate activism a lot. She's testified at Paris. She had a lot of speaking appointments in Glasgow. She's really doing the work. And she was in our CCOP program. And one of the things that I hope I will always remember from COP26 is when she stood up at our CCOP dinner and toasted and said, primarily to people like Rich and I, who are from the US or Canada, from historically high emitting countries. And she said, we are bound together by one atmosphere. We share an atmosphere. We are connected. Our actions are connected to one another's outcomes. So I want you to tell people back in your homes that whatever you're doing for the climate and for the environment, you are also doing for those of us in frontline communities like in the Philippines. We have solutions. More of these solutions are coming all the time, but we already know largely what needs to be done. It's not, sometimes there's a lot of distracting talk about, technology needs to get better. Sure, some technology does need to get better, but we largely already have the solutions we need. We know that we need to transition our energy systems from heat producing fossil fuels and change them to renewable energy. No small feat, but doable. As individuals, is to think less like individuals, be less of individuals. This is something that Christian and climate activist Bill McKibben says all the time. The best thing you can do as an individual is be less of an individual. And y'all on this call are already doing that in a way, because you're part of a creation care team, or you're part of a network of people that are taking action. And so that is one encouragement I'd have is, going forward, there need to be more and more of us who are part of collective groups who are really pushing for change. And without taking away from, and I'm going to hold these together as a paradox, without taking away from, as individuals, we need to be less of individuals. We need to move collectively. At the same time, I think it's true that this is such a, there are so many fronts to climate change and climate solutions that everybody, regardless of your skills, your network, your resources, you have something only you can contribute. So I think both of those things can be true at the same time in finding your lane and how to step up and to help. That collective action really, really matters in a very time-sensitive way, and yet we all can do things that only we are positioned and situated to do.
Yeah, thanks to both you guys for pointing that out. I think it was also Bill McGibbon who said individual action on climate is a great place to start, but it's a terrible place to end. Meaning it is important to take individual action. And part of taking individual action kind of gets you in the game, and it gets you involved at a broader level. You start talking to other people about things like solar panels and recycling and your diet and your modes of transportation, all those things, and all that spreads. Other people pick up on that and say, oh, if he could do it, I could do it too. And so that's very important. And it's also very important for us to work together in these collective ways around advocacy. And we have to be doing everything at this point. Another thought for all of you folks, if we seem to be focused mostly on advocacy here. If you're interested in getting involved in advocacy, a group that came out of the Church of the Servant is the Grand Rapids Area Advocacy Team. That's part of the Climate Witness Project. And those folks are meeting regularly with state legislators, city council members, county commissioners. I personally sit on the mayor's Energy Advisory Committee. We also meet regularly with federal representatives. So if you're interested in those kinds of conversations, they're absolutely fascinating, and they're not intimidating. If you're interested in getting involved with that, let me know, and I'll get you in touch with Tom McWhirter, who heads up that committee.